Tensions are reaching a fever pitch between India and Pakistan. This after India fired missiles at Pakistan in what has turned into the worst confrontation between the two nuclear powers since 2019. Protesters in Pakistan cry out against the Indian attacks, calling on their country to respond. India's defense ministry says the attack was in retaliation for last month's massacre of Indian tourists. Pakistan called the strike an act of war and claims it has downed several Indian fighter jets. Dozens have been killed in the exchanges of fire amid all the destruction. The international community is chiming in, raising concern over the possibility of war. Joining us now is Kriti Upadhyaya, visiting fellow for India policy in the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for joining us. Tensions have been simmering between these two countries ever since gunmen opened fire on Indian tourists in Kashmir. How did we get here?
Well, thanks for having me here. And I think it's important to understand that this is not a one-time incident or like a border skirmish, right? This is a long-standing strategic conflict issue between two countries, two nuclear-powered countries, which really makes the stakes higher. And how did we get here? Well, I think one thing that even the present president, as well as the U.S., has recognized is that while India tries to create a status quo, Pakistan usually does use proxy warfare and asymmetric warfare, and those attacks on innocent people, many of them honeymooners in Pahalgam, was sort of a reflection of just that. And what India has done is really responded to that terrorist attack. And I think it's very important to keep 2-3 things in mind, that India, in this case, was not the aggressor. India was actually just responding to what Pakistan did. Secondly, India has tried, because this has happened before, 2016, 2019, and what India tries to do in these situations is not to escalate, so have a response that is still a befitting response, but doesn't really necessarily go into, say, civilian or military installments. So what India has done is that it struck those areas where terrorists really, train or have a presence.
Kriti, what role is the international community going to play if two nuclear powers do, in fact, end up in a war with each other?
I think we shouldn't just cry war yet, because these things have happened before, and the two powers have been able to avoid war, at least in the past 2 decades or so on. But that having been said, I think there's a very important role that the international community has to play, and they have been doing that. I think most of the folks have said when the terrorist attack happened that they condemned the attack, including the U.S. I'm sure you'll recall that Vice President J.D. Vance was actually in India when the terrorist attacks happened. And right now, if there is some sort of escalation, then I'm sure everybody in the international community will make sure it doesn't really get to that stage. But having said that, I think right now we'll just have to see how this plays out in the next few days.
Absolutely. Kriti, thank you for your insight on this developing story.
Thank you.